How can you survive in conditions where the temperature drops to minus 40 degrees and there is not a single tree for a fire for hundreds of miles around? This question seems unsolvable for modern people, accustomed to central heating and electricity. However, the indigenous peoples of North America have lived in such conditions for centuries, turning the deadly cold into a familiar part of their daily lives. Their survival strategies did not rely on complex technologies, but were based on a deep understanding of the laws of physics and the properties of natural materials. Winter on the Great Plains is not just snow and frost, it is icy winds that can penetrate any clothing. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Crow tribes developed a unique life support system where every detail, from the stitching on moccasins to the angle of the walls of their dwellings, was crucial. It was not a struggle against nature, but a struggle for harmony with it, where the slightest mistake could cost the entire tribe their lives. Watch the video to the end to find out how ordinary grass became more effective than a wool blanket and what engineering secret allowed them to keep their homes warm with virtually no firewood. What if I told you that the best building material for protection from the cold was what lay right under your feet? On the plains, where wood was a rare and valuable resource, the indigenous people learned to use the earth as their main insulator. The earthen beds built by some sedentary tribes were masterpieces of bioarchitecture, capable of maintaining above freezing temperatures even in the most severe frosts. The construction of such a dwelling began with a depression in the soil, which allowed the geothermal heat of the earth to be used. The walls and roof were formed from a strong wooden frame on which layers of willow and dry grass were laid. On top, this structure was covered with a thick layer of turf, which created an airtight capsule. This multi-layered structure worked on the principle of a thermos, retaining heat inside and preventing cold from entering. The thick earthen walls had enormous thermal inertia, slowly accumulating heat from the hearth and releasing it just as slowly. Even if the fire went out, the temperature in the room dropped very slowly, remaining acceptable for living. The entrance to the earthen lodge was always designed with a special tunnel that served as a kind of airlock. This corridor, hung with skins, prevented cold wind from entering the living space directly when the door was open. Cold air, being heavier than warm air, remained at the bottom of the tunnel without penetrating the main room. Inside such a house, a special microclimate was always maintained, which did not depend on the vagaries of the weather outside. The earthen walls absorbed excess moisture, preventing the formation of dampness, which could be fatal in winter. It was a perfectly balanced system that required a minimum amount of fuel for heating. Interestingly, the roof of the earthen bed was so sturdy that people often used it as a place to observe or relax on warm days. In winter, the layer of snow on the roof served as additional natural insulation, further increasing the energy efficiency of the dwelling. Nature itself completed the house, making it even more protected from the elements. The size of such structures could be impressive, accommodating several dozen people and food supplies. Living together in large numbers also helped to conserve heat, as human bodies are themselves sources of energy. In conditions of firewood shortage, this factor became critically important. Construction required collective effort and precise load calculations to prevent the heavy earthen roof from collapsing on the inhabitants. Knowledge about the properties of different types of wood and soil was passed down from generation to generation. It was not just a hole in the ground, but a complex engineering structure. Similar construction technologies were found not only on the plains, but also in other regions with harsh climates. The principle of using earth as an insulator is universal and is still used in ecological construction today. This proves that ancient methods were based on a rational and scientific approach. We are very interested in hearing your opinion. What do you think about the prospects of using such earth houses in modern eco-friendly construction? Write about it in the comments. Want to know a secret that will change your idea of what can burn? When you are in the endless steppe, where there are no branches or trees, the question of fuel becomes a matter of life and death. Native Americans found an ingenious solution using a resource that was always in abundance thanks to the huge herds of bison. We are talking about dried bison dung, which was called bison chips. This type of fuel had unique characteristics that made it ideal for use in homes. Unlike firewood, which burns brightly and quickly, dry dung smolders slowly and evenly, giving off steady heat. This allowed them to maintain a constant temperature in their tipis or earthen beds throughout the night without having to constantly add fuel. Collecting this fuel was an important part of preparing for winter, which was done by women and teenagers. They selected only completely dry, solid pieces that had been lying in the sun for months. Properly dried chips were light as cardboard and did not stain your hands at all. When burned, this fuel produced surprisingly little smoke, which was critically important in the confined space of a dwelling. Smoke from wood could sting the eyes and make breathing difficult, while bison dung burned almost completely, leaving only a pile of white ash. The smell when burning was similar to burning grass and was quite tolerable. The energy efficiency of this fuel was remarkable, considering its origin from recycled grass. The dense structure of the compressed organic matter allowed it to accumulate the solar energy stored by plants during the summer. It was a kind of natural briquette, created without the use of machines or presses. Lighting such a fire required special skill, as manure does not ignite instantly like dry pine needles. Dry grass and small twigs from shrubs were used to create the initial temperature for smoldering. Once lit, the fire could burn for hours, requiring only minimal maintenance. During military campaigns or hunting expeditions, each warrior carried a supply of this fuel if the route passed through treeless areas. This ensured that water could be boiled or food heated at any point along the route. Independence from the availability of forests gave the tribes enormous mobility. Interestingly, different types of grass eaten by bison in different seasons affected the quality of the fuel. Summer manure was considered the best because it contained more fiber and dried better under the hot sun. Knowledge of these nuances made it possible to stock up on the highest quality supplies for the winter. Even white settlers moving west quickly adopted this practice when faced with a shortage of wood. They called this fuel prairie coal and often owed their survival of cold nights on the prairies to it. This is an example of a technology that was so effective that it transcended cultural barriers. I wonder how you feel about this topic. Would you be able to cook food on such a fire, knowing its origin? Are you ready to learn the truth about how a piece of fabric can work better than a brick wall? Tipis are often mistakenly perceived as simple tents, but in fact they are complex aerodynamic structures with adjustable ventilation. The main secret to winter comfort in a teepee was the inner lining, known as dew cloth or ozon. This lining was an extra layer of leather or hide that was stretched inside the dwelling along the bottom of the walls. It was attached to poles at human height and hung down to the ground, pressing tightly against it. At the same time, the outer covering of the teepee did not reach the ground by a few centimeters, leaving a gap. This design created a draft effect, working on the principle of a modern chimney. Cold air entered from outside through the gap under the outer covering, but did not enter the living space, which was cut off by the inner lining. Instead, it rose between the two layers, creating an air cushion. This airflow served a dual purpose. It insulated the living area from the cold outer wall and created powerful draft for the chimney above. Smoke from the fire in the center was picked up by this upward flow and drawn into the smoke hole. Thanks to this, the inside of the teepee always had clean air without smoke. The air gap between the outer covering and the lining acted as an excellent insulator, preventing the loss of radiant heat. Even when a blizzard raged outside, the inside remained at a comfortable temperature, allowing people to stay without outer clothing. Engineers today call this the double facade principle. Adjusting the smoke valves from the outside allowed the draft to be adjusted depending on the direction and strength of the wind. Two long poles controlled these valves, allowing them to be turned with the wind. This required constant attention and experience to prevent smoke from blowing inside. The interior space of the teepee, due to its conical shape, perfectly distributed heat from the central hearth. Reflecting off the sloping walls, the heat radiation was focused in the center, where people slept. The round shape also minimized the surface area in contact with the cold wind. For additional insulation, the space between the lining and the outer wall was often filled with dry grass or hay. This turned the lower part of the dwelling into a real insulated wall, impervious to frost. The grass served as a porous insulator, trapping still air. The floor of a teepee was never bare earth. It was covered with a thick layer of sagebrush or willow branches and topped with bison hides. This bedding not only insulated against the cold of the ground, but also provided springiness, creating a comfortable surface for sleeping. The sage also disinfected the air and repelled insects. This complex ventilation and insulation system made it possible to live in a mobile leather dwelling even during the harshest winters. The tipi was not just a shelter, but a survival machine designed for maximum efficiency. Please like this post if you are impressed by the ingenuity of this ancient design. What if everything you've been taught about warm clothing isn't entirely true? Indigenous peoples understood the principle of layering and air insulation long before the invention of synthetic insulation. Their winter clothing was not just a set of skins, but a sophisticated system that created a microclimate around the human body. The basis of the winter wardrobe was a bison skin, tanned in a special way, with the thick winter undercoat preserved. Such capes were worn with the fur inside, creating an air layer between the body and the cold skin. The air trapped in the fur's fibers was heated by body heat and served as the best insulator. Moccasins, the main footwear of the plains, were transformed into high-tech boots in winter. They were made larger so that a thick layer of dry grass or moss could be placed inside. This plant-based insulation absorbed excess moisture from the feet and retained heat even better than woolen socks. The principle of dry feet was elevated to an absolute, as moisture instantly conducts cold. The grass in the moccasins was changed every day, drying the used portion by the fire. This made it possible to avoid frostbite even during long walks in deep snow. Outerwear was often made from deer or elk leather, which has a unique tubular hair structure. Each hair is hollow and filled with air, making the skin incredibly warm and light. This natural property was used to create windproof jackets and leggings. An important element was leather mittens, which were often connected by a cord thrown over the neck. Unlike gloves with fingers, mittens allowed the fingers to warm each other, which was much more effective at keeping the hands warm. They were often made from otter or beaver skins, whose fur is particularly resistant to moisture and frost. Hoods or separate fur collars were used to protect the head and neck. Women's dresses in winter were complemented by separate sleeves, which could be removed indoors. The modularity of clothing allowed body temperature to be regulated, avoiding dangerous overheating and sweating. Clothing was never tight so as not to interfere with blood circulation. The loose fit created additional air pockets that helped retain heat. Belts and ties allowed these pockets to be sealed in strong winds or opened for ventilation during physical activity. Clothing decorations, such as fringes, also had a practical purpose. They helped to quickly drain water during rain or snowmelt. Water rolled down the strips of leather without having time to soak into the main surface of the clothing. Every detail of the costume had a functional purpose. This clothing was so effective that it allowed hunters to lie in the snow for hours, waiting for prey. In the next chapter, you will learn what you needed to eat in order for your body to generate heat, like a stove. In extreme cold, food ceases to be just a way to satisfy hunger and becomes fuel for heating. The indigenous people understood perfectly well that maintaining body temperature required a diet with an incredibly high energy content. Carbohydrates and plant foods took a backseat to fats. The main winter superfood was pemmican, a concentrated mixture of dried, ground meat, and melted fat. Sometimes dried berries were added for flavor and vitamins, but fat always remained the basis. This product could be stored for years without spoiling and had a tremendous calorie content. A palm-sized piece of pemmican could provide a warrior with energy for a whole day of active work in the cold. The fat was digested slowly, providing a long-lasting and steady supply of energy necessary for thermoregulation. This allowed the body to work like a furnace, generating heat from within. Bone marrow was another prized delicacy and an important source of fat. It was eaten raw or cooked, providing an instant boost of energy and essential micronutrients. No part of the hunted animal was wasted, as fat was the currency of survival. Hot soups and broths formed the basis of the evening meal in the winter camp. Hot stones from the fire were thrown into the broth, which allowed the liquid to boil quickly in leather bags or wooden dishes. Liquid hot food warmed the body faster from the inside, spreading heat throughout the body. Hunting was more difficult in winter, so the supplies made in summer and autumn played a crucial role. Storage pits dug into the ground, and camouflaged concealed supplies of dried meat, corn, and vegetables. The elders were skilled in the art of distributing these resources correctly for the long winter months. Consuming large amounts of animal fat also helped maintain skin condition, protecting it from drying out and cracking in the cold. Internal nutrition was supplemented by external nutrition. Fat was often applied to exposed areas of the face to protect against chapping. Tribes living closer to water bodies were actively engaged in ice fishing in winter. Fatty fish was an excellent addition to the meat diet. Fish oil was also used as fuel for lamps in the longhouses of the Iroquois and the igloo peoples of the north. The metabolism of people adapted to such a diet was rebuilt to burn fat efficiently. This allowed them to feel cheerful and energetic in conditions where modern people would suffer from a decline in strength. Nutrition was the foundation of their resistance to the cold. This diet seems extreme to modern nutritionists, but in the conditions of glacial cold, it was the only one possible. It demonstrates how food culture is shaped by the harsh pressures of the environment. What if I showed you a time machine that would transport you to a world where cold is defeated by cold? For most modern people, snowdrifts are associated only with wet feet and frost. However, for the indigenous peoples of the North, snow has remained for centuries not just precipitation, but a real gift of nature and a building resource. The secret lies in the physical properties of snow itself, which ancient people knew about through experience. Snow cover consists of myriad ice crystals, between which a huge amount of air is trapped. It is this trapped air that makes snow an excellent insulator. The inhabitants of the plains and subarctic forests understood this property well and actively applied it in their daily lives. When the harsh winter months arrived, they used snow to provide additional insulation for their homes from the outside. This was a mandatory procedure in preparation for the long winter. Men and women raked high snowbanks around the base of their tipis or wigwams. Often such a snowbank reached a meter in height and fit snugly against the skins or bark from which the walls were made. Without this procedure, it was extremely difficult to survive the severe frosts. This snow barrier performed several vital functions for the inhabitants of the dwelling. It reliably closed the lower gaps through which icy drafts could penetrate inside. In addition, the wall created a powerful air cushion at ground level, where the coldest air usually accumulates. In regions where snowfall was particularly heavy, special temporary shelters were built. These structures were called keens and resembled large bear dens. Travelers often used them when they were far from the main settlement. The main enemy in open spaces was always the wind, which blew away the heat instantly. Snow walls completely blocked the gusts of wind, creating a quiet and peaceful atmosphere inside. This allowed people to regain their strength and wait out the bad weather in safety. Snow was also used by indigenous peoples as the main and most accessible source of water. In winter, rivers and lakes were covered with thick ice, which was difficult to break through, so they melted snow. However, there were strict rules and important caveats. Eating cold snow was strictly forbidden, especially during transitions. Eating cold snow sharply lowered the body temperature from the inside and led to rapid hypothermia. It also required the body to expend enormous amounts of energy to warm up. It was always melted in a pot over a fire or in a leather bag using hot stones. Only warm water could hydrate the body and warm a person at the same time. This ritual was an essential part of every hunter's rest stop. Hunters also skillfully used snow to create temporary shelters and ambushes during the hunt. Burying themselves in a deep snowdrift, people became practically invisible to the keen eyes of their prey. The white color of the snow served as the perfect camouflage against the backdrop of the winter landscape. Such a snow pit also protected the hunter from the piercing wind during the long wait for the animal. A person could lie in ambush for hours, conserving heat and strength for the decisive throw. This significantly increased the chances of returning home with prey. The ability to build a proper snow hole could save a warrior's life in an emergency. If a traveler found himself far from camp during a sudden blizzard, he did not try to walk through the storm. He buried himself in the snow and waited out the storm in relative warmth. Snowshoes allowed a person's weight to be distributed over a large area and prevented them from sinking into the snow. This saved a tremendous amount of energy, which was so necessary for survival in the cold. Good snowshoes were valued as highly as good weapons. Snow was also actively used for long-term storage of perishable foods. Meat obtained from hunting was buried deep in a snowdrift near the dwelling. There it remained reliably frozen throughout the long winter. It was a real natural refrigerator, working without electricity and without failure. The snow hid the smell of meat, making it inaccessible to many small predators and birds. Large food reserves allowed the tribe to survive the hungry times. Nature gave the people of the North not only deadly cold, but also the tools to live in it. Ancient people did not fight the snow, but learned to use its properties to their advantage. This understanding of their environment was the key to prosperity in a harsh climate. The ability to see snow not as an enemy, but as a valuable resource distinguished a true survivalist from a novice. In the next chapter, you will learn how the geography of the terrain could be a matter of life and death. Choosing a place for winter camp was a strategic decision on which the fate of the entire tribe depended. The open, windy plains, comfortable in summer due to the cool breeze and absence of insects, turned into an icy hell in winter. Therefore, with the onset of cold weather, the tribes migrated to river valleys. The lowlands of the rivers offered natural protection from the wind thanks to their high banks and dense thickets of trees. The forest belts along the riverbeds, consisting of willows and poplars, significantly reduced the wind speed, creating a milder microclimate. The difference in temperature between the open plain and the sheltered valley could be quite noticeable. In addition to wind protection, river valleys provided access to fuel and water. Deadwood and driftwood carried by the river were more readily available than in open areas. Even if the river froze over, the ice could be cut through to reach fresh water. The poplar trees growing along the rivers had another important significance. Their bark, especially the soft inner part, served as food for horses during the hungriest winter months. When the grass was hidden under deep snow, poplar bark, known as sweet bark, saved herds from starvation. The location of the teepees in the camp was also not random. They were often placed in a circle or semicircle, creating an additional windbreak. The entrance to the dwelling was always oriented to the east, away from the prevailing westerly winds, so that the morning sun would be the first to illuminate and warm the entrance. Knowledge of the terrain included remembering where snow drifts formed and where the wind blew the snow away, exposing grass for the horses. Experienced chiefs led their tribes along routes that minimized the struggle with deep snow. It was navigation based on centuries of climate observation. In the wooded areas of the east where the Iroquois and Algonquians lived, the choice of location also depended on the availability of resources. But there it was more important to find a place that was protected from snowdrifts and close to the migration routes of winter game, such as moose. Winter camps were more permanent than summer camps. Sometimes tribes had to move frequently, even in winter, if resources in one valley were depleted. The ability to quickly break camp and move to a new location in freezing conditions was a vital skill. Every member of the tribe knew their role in this process. Using the natural terrain, ravines, rocky outcrops, dense forests, saved resources on building shelters. Nature had already created walls. They just needed to be used correctly. This was a strategy of maximum adaptation to the landscape. Thus, geography was the first line of defense against winter. The right location gave them an advantage in the fight for warmth, allowing them to save fuel and energy. In the culture of indigenous peoples, the concept of personal space that we are familiar with was radically transformed in winter for the sake of survival. In the harsh conditions of the North, pride and the desire for solitude could cost lives. Individualism gave way to collectivism in the most literal and physical sense of the word. People understood that loneliness and freezing weather was a sure path to death. Sleeping alone on a cold night was considered not just foolish, but a dangerous waste of precious heat. The survival of the tribe depended on the ability to be together, literally shoulder to shoulder. Inside the teepee or dugout, sleeping places were always arranged in a strictly defined manner around the central hearth. This allowed for the most efficient use of the heat from the fire that burned in the middle of the dwelling. No one slept in the corners or near the walls, where drafts blew. People lay down for the night in tight groups, covering themselves with large shared fur blankets. Usually, these huge blankets were sewn from several thick bison hides. The warmth of several human bodies, united under one such heavy blanket, created a powerful thermal cocoon. This living structure worked much more effectively than any layer of clothing on a single person. The air under the skins quickly heated up and remained there until morning. Even if the fire in the hearth went out, the collective heat kept people from freezing. Children and the elderly were always placed in the very center of such a sleeping group. It was there, in the middle, that the temperature was highest and most stable. It was the safest area where cold air from the periphery could not penetrate. The strongest adult men and women lay down at the edges of this group. They took on the role of a living shield, protecting the others with their bodies from possible drafts from the entrance. It was a kind of living battery, where each element supported the existence of the others. The longhouses of the Iroquois, which could accommodate several families at once, were a striking example of architectural collectivism. These structures were built of bark and wood and could reach considerable lengths. Inside such a house, life never stood still. Along the central axis of the house, there were many hearths, the smoke from which escaped through openings in the roof. The presence of dozens of people and the constant fire created a temperature significantly higher than outside. The walls protected from the wind, and the breath of many people heated the air. In such conditions, the common space was the main guarantee of survival for the entire clan or large family. People shared not only food and shelter, but also the warmth of their bodies. In the cramped space of the longhouse, it was impossible to freeze as long as the clan stayed together. On the coldest and most bitter nights, the most valuable horses could be brought into the spacious tipis. These were usually war horses or beloved animals that the family could not afford to lose. The animals not only sought refuge there from the deadly frost outside. Inside, large animals acted as huge and powerful living heaters. Horses emit much more heat than humans, and this property was actively exploited. Their hot breath and the warmth of their massive bodies helped raise the temperature inside the dwelling by several degrees. Working together in a close circle also helped to keep warm during the day. Women processing skins or men making weapons and tools never sat alone. They gathered in close groups, touching each other's shoulders or backs. Sharing warmth, they engaged in leisurely conversation, which helped pass the long winter hours. The psychological comfort of being in a group was as important as the physical warmth. The feeling of togetherness gave them confidence that winter would surely end. The famous expression, "night of three dogs," has a very practical and understandable origin. This was the name given to a night that was so cold that a person needed to hug three dogs to keep warm and survive. Animals were full participants in the fight against the cold. Such a close-knit lifestyle required the highest level of social harmony and tolerance towards one another. It is impossible to live in cramped conditions and isolation for long months if there are constant quarrels within the group. Any serious conflict could destroy the fragile balance and endanger everyone's life. Winter was a harsh test not only of physical endurance, but also of the social strength of the tribe. Collective warmth was a unique resource that could not be bought or found in the forest. It could only be created together by combining efforts and caring for one another. In addition to material technologies, there was a powerful system of psychological and physical preparation for the cold. Native Americans did not hide from the cold behind thick walls. From birth, they taught their bodies to accept it as a natural part of life. The practice of hardening was not a one-time event, but began in early childhood and continued throughout life. Young children were gradually accustomed to the cold, without wrapping them in extra layers of fur, unless absolutely necessary. It was believed that a pampered body would become weak and unable to withstand the harsh nature of the North. Parents knew that endurance would be the best protection for their children in the future. Morning bathing in an icy river or nearby lake was a mandatory tradition for many tribes, even in the most bitter cold. Men, women, and children would go to the water at dawn to perform this ritual. It was believed that cold water instantly strengthened the spirit and made the body completely immune to disease. Warriors often rubbed their bodies with prickly snow immediately after waking up or after leaving their warm dwellings. This procedure helped to quickly stimulate blood circulation and instantly increase the overall tone of the body. The skin became strong and the senses were sharpened, preparing a person for a long day of hunting or hiking. This harsh practice had a deep spiritual meaning, symbolically cleansing a person before the start of each new day. But from a purely physiological point of view, it was constant training for the vascular system. The vessels got used to instantly constricting and expanding, effectively distributing heat inside the body. People with such long-term training were much less likely to suffer from frostbite or dangerous hypothermia. Their bodies knew how to respond correctly to icy winds and low humidity. What was a deadly ordeal for a stranger was a familiar morning routine for an Indian. An important skill was the ability to control one's breathing and remain completely still for long periods of time. Unnecessary and fussy movements in the cold, unless aimed at actively warming up, always lead to rapid energy loss. Hunters knew that every unnecessary movement literally stole their warmth. Experienced trackers knew how to enter a special state that was very close to deep meditation. At such moments, they consciously slowed down their metabolism and heart rate. This allowed them to lie in the snow for hours waiting for an animal, without shivering from the cold and without revealing their presence. The psychological attitude that cold is a wise teacher, not an enemy, completely changed the perception of discomfort. The pain from frostbite in the fingers or on the face was perceived as an important signal to take action, not as a reason to panic. People calmly analyzed their feelings and took measures to warm themselves up. Panic in extreme cold kills a person much faster than the frost itself because it causes them to make fatal mistakes. A frightened person begins to run, sweat, and quickly lose their last reserves of strength. Calmness, on the other hand, allowed them to assess the situation soberly and find a way out of even the most difficult situation. Outdoor games and sports competitions helped young people maintain excellent physical shape and high morale. Lacrosse, speed races on snowshoes, and throwing heavy spears into snowdrifts were commonplace. These activities literally made the blood boil in the veins and prevented the muscles from freezing. For Indigenous peoples, being active was synonymous with life itself in winter. Even on the coldest days, no one sat idle if there was an opportunity to move. The competitive element in games ignited an inner fire and helped them forget about the sub-zero temperatures around them. From an early age, wise elders taught young people to carefully watch for the first signs of hypothermia in themselves and their companions. The appearance of white spots on the skin, sudden slow speech, or unusual clumsiness were noticed by those around them instantly. These were the first signs that a person was starting to freeze. The system of mutual observation was an integral part of the general culture of safety within the tribe. People constantly looked out for each other during transitions or when working together outdoors. Timely assistance from a companion often prevented serious injury or even death. Even in the design and wearing of clothing, an important principle was always practiced. It is better to feel slightly cool than to be wet. If a person realized that they were starting to sweat during hard physical work, they immediately removed excess layers of skins. Moisture on the body under clothing was the shortest route to freezing. The ability to delicately balance between comfort and slight coolness was considered an essential survival skill. Fur and leather clothing was worn in such a way that air always circulated between the body and the fabric. This allowed the body to breathe and remain dry even during strenuous activity. Special spiritual rituals, such as the famous sun dance or regular visits to the Tipis sweat lodge, also trained endurance. In the sweat lodge, people were exposed to extremely high temperatures, which strengthened their hearts and willpower. The hot steam was often followed by immersion in snow or cold water. Such sharp contrasts made the warrior's body strong and reliable, like a mountain rock. A person who had gone through such trials ceased to fear the vagaries of the weather. He gained inner confidence that his body could cope with any external pressure. This iron internal discipline was the very core that allowed people not just to survive in a harsh climate, it gave them the opportunity to live a full and joyful life in conditions that would quickly break any unprepared person. Harmony with nature began with victory over one's own weakness. This inner discipline was the core that allowed people not only to survive, but also to live a full life in conditions that would break an unprepared person. Let's move from the open plains to the dense forests of the Northeast, where the Iroquois, or Haudenosaunee, developed a completely different strategy for wintering. Their answer to the bitter cold and forest blizzards was the famous longhouses. These were huge communal dwellings, built entirely of elm bark in a sturdy wooden frame. Such structures were impressive in size and could reach 100 meters in length, accommodating dozens of people. A longhouse was essentially like a covered street, where entire clans lived under one reliable roof. The foundation was a frame made of young, flexible tree trunks that were dug deep into the ground and bent at the top to form an arch. Then this skeleton of the future house was tightly covered with large sheets of tree bark. The sheets were laid overlapping, like modern roof tiles, so that water and snow would simply roll off. The ancient builders chose elm bark for a reason, as it had unique natural properties. It was incredibly durable, virtually waterproof, and had excellent insulating characteristics. In winter, this cladding became a reliable shield that kept the icy wind out of the room. The walls of the house served as a natural barrier between the harsh winter and the cozy interior. Inside the house, the entire space was clearly laid out and divided into separate compartments for each family. These living quarters were located along both walls along the entire length of the building, leaving a wide passage in the middle. In this central passage, hearths burned continuously at equal intervals. Each fire served two families who lived opposite each other and watched over the fire together. Special longitudinal openings were provided in the high roof of the house for smoke to escape. In case of heavy snowfall or particularly severe frosts, these hatches could be quickly covered with pieces of bark. This allowed precious heat to be retained inside, although the air became quite smoky. However, for the Iroquois, a little smoke was a small price to pay for the opportunity to stay warm. With the arrival of winter, the longhouse turned into a closed world with its own rules. The thick bark walls were further insulated with moss, which was stuffed into every tiny hole. Numerous hearths burning simultaneously created a very warm and even humid microclimate inside the house. It was a striking change from the dry and frosty air that prevailed outside. Special wooden bunks, raised high above the ground, were used for sleeping and resting. This arrangement protected people from the cold that inevitably came from the frozen soil and from the drafts below. Personal belongings were usually stored under the bunks, and the people themselves slept in the warmth that rose from the fires. This was a thoughtful and very effective solution for collective survival. Unlike the nomadic tribes of the plains, the Iroquois led a sedentary lifestyle and could afford to make serious preparations. They stockpiled huge reserves of dry firewood in advance to last them through the winter months. Wood piles were prepared in the fall and neatly stacked in special vestibules at the ends of the house. Having firewood on hand ensured that the fire burned continuously throughout the long winter. Every crack in the walls was carefully caulked with a mixture of wet moss and river clay. After drying, this putty made the house virtually windproof, even in the strongest storm winds. The entrance doors at both ends of the longhouse were closed with heavy, thick animal skins. During the most severe frosts, people's lives were completely centered around the central hearths. Women cooked hot meals by the fire, while men repaired hunting equipment and sewed warm clothes. It was a time for long conversations and telling endless tales and legends of their people. Working together and communicating helped people not only to keep warm, but also to maintain their spirits. At such moments, the longhouse became the true heart of the community, providing comfort and protection. The longhouse also served as a place to store the enormous food supplies gathered during the summer. Bunches of golden corn, beans, and bright pumpkins were hung from the ceiling on special poles to dry. Smoke from the hearths constantly enveloped these products, acting as a natural preservative and protection against spoilage. In addition, the smoke effectively repelled small pests and rodents from the tribe's valuable supplies. Thus, the longhouse was at once a comfortable dwelling, a reliable warehouse, and an impregnable fortress. Here, people could wait out any bad weather, knowing that they had enough food and warmth. A complex system of organization allowed the Iroquois not only to survive, but to thrive in the wilderness. The architecture of the house was completely subordinated to the needs of the large community. The social structure of the Iroquois was ideal for such close and communal living during the winter. Their society was based on matriarchy and very strong kinship ties between clan members. Women in the longhouse had enormous authority and completely controlled the entire household. They distributed shared food resources and ensured strict adherence to internal order. The cramped conditions and lack of private rooms were compensated for by clear rules of conduct and deep mutual respect. Each clan member knew their place and their responsibilities to their fellow tribesmen. Conflicts were nipped in the bud, as it was understood that the survival of all inhabitants depended on peace in the house. Such social cohesion was as important as the strength of the bark walls. Life in a longhouse required a high degree of cooperation and the ability to negotiate with each other. In return, it provided the most reliable protection from the aggressive external environment that could be created in the forest. It was a striking example of how a sedentary lifestyle allowed for large-scale solutions to the problem of cold weather. The architecture of the Iroquois literally reflected the social structure of their harmonious society. The Iroquois clearly demonstrated that even in harsh and dark forests, it is possible to create excellent living conditions. Using only wood, bark, and the strength of a united community, they built houses that were impervious to any frost. We have seen that the survival of Native Americans in winter was not the result of a single miracle technology, but a complex set of deep knowledge and strategies. From the use of bison dung and earthen bed architecture to a special diet and the psychology of hardening, every aspect of life was adapted to the harsh conditions. They did not fight winter, but lived within it, using its characteristics to their advantage. These people turned a scarcity of resources into an incentive for ingenuity. Their experience reminds us that comfort depends not so much on technology as on the ability to understand the world around us and adapt to it. Which survival strategy did you find most surprising? Was it the fiery secret of bison dung or the engineering trick with tipi ventilation? Suggest topics for future videos about the daily life of ancient peoples that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe.